landfill gas, incinerators, biofuels. All of these strategies are employed in some way or another at various facilities. And we've got a lot of initial projects that we need to coalesce together to enable all of our facilities to advance their net zero energy goals. Next slide. Net zero water is an interesting goal, and water is increasingly becoming a scarce resource. And net zero water is something that people haven't talked about, but again applies the same net zero philosophy as energy. If you start with the idea of reducing the amount of water you use, reducing the amount of potable water you use, and then you look at reusing water, taking water that comes from showers and reusing it by filtering it, and then reusing it for either the same primary purpose like we are in the field. We're treating it, we're filtering it, and reusing it for shower water, so that when you get to an operational base or a forward operating base, you don't have to pump as much water out of the ground. But in our installations, it's a simple philosophy of not using drinking water to irrigate our landscape, to take water and repurpose it to a secondary use or even a tertiary use before it's disposed of. Next slide. Net zero waste is the third objective. And again, it goes back to that same net zero philosophy, which is first reduce the amount of waste. Our facilities are conducting waste audits to determine what their waste streams are. What is in the waste? What are the constituents of the waste? So once you understand what's in the waste, you can try and reduce that waste that's entering the facility. And then after you've reduced the amount of waste, you can look at recycling programs with the idea of we don't want to build more landfills. We have better uses for our land. We want to use them for training, or we want to use them for housing. We don't want to be using them for more landfills. Next slide. So if you look at a net zero hierarchy, whether it is energy, water, or waste, it has the same basic philosophy. You start with reduction by reducing the amount you use. Second, you look at repurposing. Is there a secondary use for what comes out of the primary purpose? And then you look at recycling or composting, then energy recovery, and the last is disposal. Because when you have a true net zero facility, there's nothing left to dispose of. That you have put as much water back into the ground as you've taken out. That you have a net zero installation in that you're producing as much energy on site as your facility is using. And that's not to say we're going to be entirely separate from the grid, but the electrical grid is aging. It is an older grid. It's also overloaded. And especially as we grow our installations, we have put an increased stress on the grid. So if we reduce that stress on the grid during the day, and perhaps some of our energy produced on site can be put back onto the grid, and then we take energy off the grid at night, and so we use the grid as a storage mechanism. It makes us better partners in the community. It also helps us become more self-reliant and increases energy security. Next slide. The challenges are, first of all, that it costs money to make money, or it costs money to save money, I should say. But we have tools at our disposal that we're leveraging, whether they're enhanced use lease or power purchase agreements or energy saving performance contracts. All of those are tools that we have to use that our installations are using today to help leverage public-private partnerships, to help leverage private industry funding to enable us to do more with limited federal funding. Also, there's an ability to leverage incentives. Utilities, partnering with utilities. It's a great story talking to the guys at Fort Bliss in their partnership with a utility through public-private partnerships or energy-saving performance contracts, or talking to some of the guys out in California who are leveraging utility incentives to help reduce the first cost. There's a lot of opportunities for us to leverage our partnerships. And back to something that you've heard the President say over and over again, if not now, when? We need to improve energy security. We need to become less reliant on fossil fuels. And we need to do it now. And I'm proud to say that our facilities are stepping up their game, that our installations are becoming creative. And we have a lot of good things that are going on. We have a lot of great case histories, a lot of great case studies where facilities are well on their way toward meeting a net zero goal. Next slide. So when we talk about sustain in the energy and environmental world, it means something a little bit different. Certainly sustaining our all-volunteer force is the first imperative. But then when you look at it, you have to have key resources to sustain the Army, the soldiers, their families and civilians, and a lot of that is assured access to energy and water. So when you look at sustainability, ensuring that we have those resources, we need to be prudent stewards of those resources. We need to better manage them. And when we do, it helps enhance our relationships, both with our neighbors here in the United States and abroad where we're establishing our bases. Thank you very much.
Okay, Secretary Hammack, thank you very much. Okay, our next panel member will be Lieutenant General Van Antwerp.
I see how we're doing this. We're doing beauty first, and then it's age after that. That's how it's going here. Well, it's great. I have to tell a little story on Catherine. My very first meeting with her, I brought a glass of bottled water, or a bottle of bottled water. Obviously, she doesn't have one. If you did see her chart on there, the last part down there is disposal. And you go onto the beaches of America, which I've been to a lot of them, you know what you see all over? Plastic and stuff. Now there is some on the table. I'll fault you for that we have some bottled water up here. But I'm not drinking it, Catherine. I'm not. Actually, it's great to be here. Between Rick and Eric and I, we actually are kind of enterprises that work for the enterprise. We have this wonderful enterprise that's installations, but we all have our separate enterprises, but we do fit together, and you'll kind of see that, I think, this afternoon. But before I start, I want to make sure, who's in the audience? I want to know, are there any engineers in the audience? So I want to know how fast I can talk and those kinds of things. All right, roll the video, if you would, just a second. To you engineers, my condolences.
Worried about little Dilbert. He's not like other kids.
What do you mean?
Yesterday, I left him alone for a minute, and he disassembled the TV, our clock, and the stereo.
That's perfectly normal. Kids take things apart.
Oh! The part that worries me is he used the components to build a ham radio set.
Oh, dear.
Is that bad?
Normally, I'd want to run an EEG on him, but the machine isn't working. It's worse than I feared.
What is it?
I'm afraid your son has the knack.
The knack?
The knack. It's a rare condition characterized by an extreme intuition about all things mechanical and electrical, and utter social ineptitude.
Can he lead a normal life?
No. He'll be an engineer.
No!
Now I should ask, are there any engineers in here? You can't lead a normal life and be an engineer. You know, that social ineptitude part, yeah, it applies. It applies. You know, as I think about the transformation of installations, the real part that we have over in the Corps of Engineers has to do with the transformation of the facilities. And I just want to give you just a little snapshot of what the last 2 years in the Corps looks like as it has to do with military programs. Because this is really the area where we do installations. And it's not just here for us. It's Kandahar and Kabul and every place in a lot of different countries, 34 different countries to be exact. The amount of contracts that we wrote last year in 2009, well, we're already in the new year now, but I'm going to do, 2009 was 95,000 and 96,000 in 2010. And this year's going to be a big year, a little bit less than that, because if it ain't awarded in BRAC right now, it probably won't be. We're not going to make it. One interesting thing, in 1943, the Corps of Engineers supervised the building of the Pentagon. How many months did it take from the time that they turned the first shovel till we cut the ribbon? It was about 18 months. I don't know how they did that. It's 5 stories above the ground and a bunch of stories below the ground and all those rings and everything. It's taken us 13 years to rebuild the thing. It's kind of interesting. But we're pressing on. September 15th is going to be a big day and a good day. There's 11 projects on the watch list. Those of you contractors out there, and by the way, the Corps today has over 400,000 contractors under our employ. So we are a partnership. If we think this gets done by those of us in these federal agencies, not so. It has to be brought by you all out there doing it, and we're so proud to be partners with you. There's a big 3 out there. We keep our eye on 3 big things. One's the cost. The other's the schedule. And the third one is what? It's the quality. It's the quality. I think if we argued about that for a long time and we look back through history, we really got to get the quality right. When we talk about sustainable, by the way, I looked that up in Webster's. I got a 1994 Webster's dictionary in my office. I don't use it much. It doesn't have the word sustainability in it. That's a new word, just like software and some of those other new ones, I guess. But when we talk about resilience, sustainability, we talk about innovation. That's where we got to bring it. So let me just talk about those big 3 for a second, and then I'm going to kind of close by talking about some solutions that we've come up with, and then what I hope to hear in questions and your thoughts is get some other solutions. About 3 years ago, we briefed General Dick Cody. Some of you remember him. He happens to be a classmate of mine out of West Point. He asked for a briefing, and he said, I want you to come in and I want you to tell us how we're going to go in a new direction, a transforming direction in MilCon. So we dubbed it kind of MilCon transformation. We left that briefing, we briefed him that we thought we could get 50% savings in cost and 30% savings in time if we did some things, which I'll share for you in a minute. Some of you are probably in that meeting or you know of it. At the end of that meeting, General Cody told me, he said, we'll take the 15%. So your next budget's going to be 15% less, and I want you to do the most. I said, I didn't want that to happen. But here's how it came out. We just had the IG look at it, and we did make the 15%. And I'll tell you how that was done. And we made about 25% in the schedule savings. So that's awesome. But the big piece looms out there, what's the quality? And we'll talk a little more about that. I went to Disney. I took all my kids to Disney this last Christmas. There was 25 of us because I got a bunch of grandkids and 5 kids and everything. We had a ball. My 34-year-old son, who's in the Special Forces, was singing the Disney song in the shower. You know it took when you got that. But while I was there, you know, engineers, when you go to Disney, you look around and you say, this is an engineering paradise. How do they think about all this stuff? So I left them for about an hour, and I trooped around. I finally got into the Disney headquarters, and I was able to talk to some engineers. You know, they don't call them the engineers. They call them Imagineers. I thought, that's pretty cool. So I came back from that trip. They're Imagineers because they do blue sky thinking, and then they get some idea like, hey, wouldn't it be neat to be in a ride where the elevator drops, you know, and scares the daylights out of you, but it only moves about 3 feet? How do they do that? Well, that's some engineer back there with an imagination, taking some concept and thought of somebody brilliant. Used to be Walt Disney, and now it's all the people that have followed him. So I came back from that time and said, what is it that we really do? And we kind of dubbed our engineers for the first time Solutioneers. Solutioneers. So I want to tell you a couple of the solutions that we've come up with. These aren't all in all. And as I say, we're always open to what's next. The other part that has to go with it is we have a good to great philosophy in the Corps. We're not great, but we're headed there. And that's where we want to get. You got to have great people. We hired 8,200 people in 2009 and 6,400 people in 2010. Pretty amazing because we got a boatload of work to do. The other part of it is those people have to put disciplined thought, your whole organization. And so what I'm about to talk to you about is a result of disciplined thought. And then, of course, you got to deliver. You got to have disciplined action. The first one is, as an enterprise, we are getting a lot better on scheduling. I know when every project has to be not occupancy date, but troop ready. That's different. That's different. We found out that's different for the enterprise. When it's troop ready, it means you can bring your computer in, you can set it on the desk and punch the wire in there, and you are good to go. Fiber optics. It means that the furniture's already there, those kinds of things. By the way, we have a centralized furnishings and furniture contract, which done really in a marvelous way out of our Huntsville Center, and I think it's saved our Army $20 to $40 million in the last couple of years. Amazing, just that one little fact, because of the scale at which we're doing everything. We're making some tough decisions. Do you build new? Do you restore? Or do you modernize? And those questions have to do with life cycle management. They have to do with the energy consumption of that building. Do you realize that when we're doing this boatload of work, we are increasing the inventory something phenomenal? You go to Fort Bliss, I mean, there was nothing out there where those brigade combat teams are today. There was nothing out there. So if you're going to meet these very stringent energy marks, we're going to have to get to net zero. Will we get there? Absolutely. I think we'll get there because I think the technology's out here. The next thing we've done is look at some very interesting acquisition tools. We're doing more design build than we've ever done. We're doing early contractor involvement. I'll be glad to talk to anybody about that. But it really means where you hire the constructor to do buildability while you're still in design. It's kind of an interesting. And then what we've been able to do, in fact, that's how the Fort Belvoir Hospital, that hospital that Catherine showed up there, not a drop of water that hits on the roof of that hospital is going to go to waste. That's amazing stuff. That's what we want to do. That's a net zero for water in that particular building. We're using MATOCs and IDIQs. I've asked our guys to go out and find the best of industry for energy conservation and the whole energy world. We now have a couple of MATOCs there in the $800 million range. So anybody that's building something new, we can use this MATOC and go in there. There's 6 great contractors in there. Centers. We have 2 types of centers in the Corps of Engineers. One's a center of expertise. That's where when we say you got to set the standard for your profession, those people are located in a center for expertise. In some cases, they're virtual, like for dam safety. We have 610 dams in the Corps. We haven't lost one yet. The Bureau of Reclamation has lost 1. We don't ever intend to, not on my watch. But you got to have experts to do that. You want people that are renowned in the world in their field. We're trying to gather those right now in energy, sustainment, and the whole gamut. Medical facilities. We're building 6 hospitals right now. Eric Schoonmaker and I have become very good friends. We were friends before, but we're very good friends now. And it's great. I can't tell you how awesome it is. And when I go in there, I stopped some people the other day. I was in a hospital, and it wasn't finished yet. I said, what do you see? And, well, engineers, what we see is, what's on the carpet or what's the wall covering or whatever. But I said, I see soldiers recovering here, soldiers that are getting better every day because the environment, the total environment is great for healing. That's awesome. We're going to help the docs out a lot, and we're excited about that. We have some centers that do electrical systems, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, ranges. We do that centralized in the Corps. We even have folks who prepare DD 1391s. You're probably familiar with those. Just a couple of more things. Here's some areas. We've gone to standard designs in some areas. We have 45 districts in the Corps of Engineers. We're building a ton of barracks and things like that, brigade combat team complexes, but we only design those in one place in the Corps. The reason being is every time we learn something, we want to plug it back into the design so it's better next time. The challenge is we don't want to get stale on that. We don't want to just site adapt, and we want to make sure innovation comes because that was part of MILCON transformation. We built a bunch of stuff it's all lead silver. Some of it's going to lead gold. That's going to be a great, with emphasis on energy. I'm going to get off the dais here, but I want to show you one other thing. I told my guys to go out and see where we could get the motto of the Corps out there. You might not know we were on Jeopardy. So roll the film. Only takes about a minute. Would you have gotten this question right?
Yes, sir. And here is the clue. This Corps' motto is building strong.
Now, how much do you bet? That's the other part here. How confident are you in your answer?
John, over to you first. Talking about the U.S. military, and you came up with, what is the Army Corps of Engineers? That's the correct response, and your wager was $6,700, taking you to $13,500. Over to your left now, Cheryl, $10,800. Army Corps of Engineers, yes. Big wager, I hope. No, just $3,000, $13,800. You're still in second place. Kathy, over to you, $21,500.
She could have gone big.
Army Corps of Engineers, you're going to remain champion. How much? Aha, smart wager, 101.
Oh, I rest my case.
2-day total, $46,002. See you tomorrow. You too, we hope. Bye.
Okay, thank you, sir. General Schoonmaker.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks, Jim. What a great place to be in the program, to follow these two great leaders and speakers before me, because I think you sense the enthusiasm and the totality of the partnership that is a part of what this program is about today. And I want to talk just briefly about what Army Medicine's role is in this enterprise transition and in the partnerships that are implicit in the enterprise transition. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of how many medics out there. Actually, I thought that Dilbert film was going to end up with, I'm sorry, he's socially inept and he's going to go to medical school, but I'm glad that that was an engineering film. I want to start off with some images here, just to get you into the mindset of what Army Medicine is faced with and what our Army is faced with in terms of the totality of the mission, and then to give you a strong sense of why this has to be a partnership. We're talking about the need to maintain, first and foremost, the strength and the health and well-being of individual soldiers, because one of the proudest aspects of being an Army medic and a military medic, quite frankly, is that we do not have to apologize for our first and most important focus on maintaining the health and well-being of every soldier and every family, and by extension, the retiree. We are not simply about fixing broken people. We're about keeping people protected from injury and illness, being protected from what we know is going to happen to us anyway. Bad things are happening to good people every day, and nothing illustrates that more than war. But it's our responsibility, first and foremost, to maintain the strength and well-being and resilience of every soldier and every family. And we cannot do that alone. This is a partnership, and if you don't hear me say this once during the course of the next 10 or so minutes, I've done wrong by you, because it's about a partnership with our installation management partners. It's a partnership with our chaplains. It's a partnership with the personnel community. Quite frankly, in Army medicine and as a part of military medicine, it's a partnership with the inter-service process of the Air Force and the Navy, and with the interagency, with the Veterans Administration and others who provide services to us. And then it's the challenge of preparing soldiers to deploy and their families to support them while they are deployed, and to reunite them successfully and safely once they are redeployed, either to be demobilized as reserve component soldiers, which is happening, as we know, so often in our Army today, or to reintegrate and restore them as active component soldiers, knowing that they carry, in some cases, invisible wounds to include concussive injury that we're now working harder and harder in tracking and identifying and